So what if the path to true perfection, to becoming the best version of yourself, meant you had to give up, well, everything? And I don't just mean the big, obvious vices. I mean every single small desire, every seemingly harmless attachment. Today we're diving into a really demanding spiritual philosophy that argues for exactly that, a path of total and complete detachment.
I mean, think about it for a second. In pretty much any area of life, do we just focus on fixing the big, glaring problems, or do we really have to sweat the small stuff? Well, the text we're looking at today takes a very, very strong position on this. It argues that the smallest, tiniest flaws can be just as binding as the biggest ones.
And there it is. That's the core idea, laid out with zero room for negotiation. This isn't just about trying to be a good person and avoiding major mistakes. No. The goal here is something called union with God. And to get there, a soul has to be freed from every appetite, no matter how tiny or insignificant it might seem. The stakes are, incredibly high.
Okay, so if the path is this idea of total detachment, what's the destination? Where are we even trying to go? Before we dig into why we have to get rid of all these desires, let's first get a handle on the end goal. What exactly is this divine union?
The key word here is really transformation. This isn't about just gritting your teeth and following a bunch of rules. It's about a complete and total merging. It's a state where your personal will and the divine will become one and the same. That inner conflict between what you want to do and what you should do, it just dissolves because they become perfectly aligned.
All right, so if divine union is the goal, what's the main thing standing in the way? According to our source, the primary obstacle is something it calls appetites.
And the most important word on this slide is voluntary. The text isn't talking about the random thoughts or fleeting desires that just pop into our heads out of nowhere. An appetite in this context is an imperfection that you consciously, knowingly give into. It's an attachment you choose to hold on to.
And this distinction is super important. On one side, you've got natural appetites, that first little stirring of desire, that initial impulse. They're unavoidable, they just happen. But on the other side, you have the voluntary appetites. This is the moment where you consciously say yes to that impulse. And that choice, that consent, is what the text says is the real roadblock to spiritual progress.
So what do these attachments actually look like? Well, you might be surprised at how small they can be. The text gives examples like being overly chatty, being attached to a favorite book, caring a bit too much about your clothes, or even just being particular about how your food is made. These are the kinds of slight appetites, it argues, have to be completely conquered.
So, if these tiny, voluntary attachments are the problem, what's the solution? Well, the path our source lays out is pretty intense. It's absolute and leaves absolutely no room for compromise. It's an all-or-nothing kind of deal.
The logic here is brutally simple. You can't pick and choose. You can't just decide, okay, I'll conquer my attachment to gossip, but I'm holding on to my attachment to fancy coffee. Nope. To achieve the goal of total transformation, the detachment also has to be total. Every single appetite has to go.
And this is the question we all have, isn't it? It sounds so extreme. Why would a small preference for a certain food or, the desire to chat with your friends be such a massive spiritual roadblock? Well, the text offers a few really powerful analogies to explain its reasoning. So let's look at the proofs the author actually gives us. These metaphors are designed to show, in very clear and stark terms, why even the smallest, most trivial attachment can have these huge consequences.
Okay, here's the first one, and it's incredibly potent. Think about it. A bird tied by a thin little thread is just as trapped as a bird tied by a thick rope. As long as that thread isn't broken, the bird can't fly. The point is that any attachment, no matter how fragile it seems, is enough to keep the soul grounded.
The second analogy is all about transformation. For a log to actually become fire, it has to reach a certain temperature. If it's even 1 single degree short, it just stays a log. It doesn't become almost fire or kind of fire. In the same way, the soul can't be transformed into that state of divine union if even one tiny imperfection, one single attachment is left.
And finally, we have the cracked pitcher. You could have this beautiful pitcher, right? It could represent a life that's full of virtues and good deeds. But if there's just one small, unrepaired crack, a single lingering attachment, then all of that spiritual liquid, all that grace, is eventually just going to leak out. One flaw can nullify the whole thing. Let's go back and take a closer look at that bird analogy. It's the one that really captures the core logic of this entire philosophy. Just look at the results column. It's identical.
It doesn't matter if the cause is a thin thread of small imperfections or a thick cord of serious sins. The outcome is exactly the same. The bird is bound. It cannot fly. From this point of view, the size of the attachment is totally irrelevant. The fact that it exists at all is the problem.
And this brings us to a really crucial point. On this spiritual path, there's no neutral ground. There's no standing still. As long as any appetite remains, you're tethered. And according to the author, to stop moving forward isn't just pausing. It's actively turning back. It's losing the ground you've already gained. So let's bring this all together for a quick summary. The goal here is a total transformation of the will, something called divine union. The obstacle is any voluntary attachment. Doesn't matter how small. The logic is absolute. A single thread can bind a soul just as tightly as a thick rope. And therefore, the only solution is complete and total detachment.
It's a challenging, really uncompromising way of looking at the world for sure, but it forces us to ask a pretty powerful question. If we apply this logic to our own lives, whether we're talking spiritual goals or any other kind of self-improvement, what's the thin thread? What's the biggest small thing that might be holding you back from where you really want to go? Definitely something to think about.